Hi, welcome to this module. In this module, we will look at the introduction to the clean room. Now, earlier modules, what we have seen introduction to Fab Lab, where you kind of I have discussed with you about what are the equipment within the Fab Lab and what kind of application we could think of if we already know how to fabricate a device, right, or in another way if you know the fabrication technology. Now, when we talk about clean room, is not just a room which is clean, but also there are some standards like how many particles in a cubic area or cubic feet should be there, what are the size of this particle, and depending on certain factors the clean rooms are divided into class 1, class 10, class 100, class 1000, class 10,000 and so on. Alright. So, we will be looking at the clean room in this module, that how the clean room can be defined. We will also look at the possible contaminants in the clean room. We will look at the protocols of how to enter a clean room lab, right. We will be showing you a recorded lecture from my lab, which shows how a person or an engineer scientist, when he or she wants to enter the laboratory, what kind of protocols one has to follow, right. So, with this that particular thing in mind, let us see this particular module. When, like I said, when we talk about clean room facility is ordinarily utilized for scientific research, chip manufacturing and industrial productions of microfabricated devices as well as pharmaceutical agents. You can see a photo of a clean room, it is class 1000 clean room, and like we discussed that a PPE needs to be in place and needs to be a person has to wear it before working in a clean room environment. So, what is the requirement of clean room? Another requirement of clean room is, let us say you fabricate a chip on a silicon wafer, and if there is a dust, right. So, on this chip there will be millions of transistors, right, and the size can anywhere from few nanometers to few micrometers size of these transistors. So, when I say nanometers, does not mean that actually size of the transistor, it means the channel length. Okay. But the overall device would be extremely tiny, and that is why you have millions of transistor on a small 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter chip. But if a particle size 0.5 micron sits on this particular chip, it looks like this. That means that 0.5 micron particle would kill lot of transistors from your silicon chip or on your silicon chip. Same thing when you develop a drug, right, in pharmacy, you need to make sure that the drug is free of any contaminants, and that is why generally pharmaceutical industries as well as industries related to chip manufacturing like Intel, TI, Qualcomm, when they go for fabrication, they use the clean room environment. Now, you must be having a question that why we require to understand clean room in introduction of neuroscience. The reason is that we can fabricate electrodes that can be used for measuring EEG signals using the clean room facility, alright. And when I say clean room facility, that means several equipment within the clean room, including the environment of the clean room. So, that is why it is important to learn the clean room, clean room protocol and the equipment within the clean room, and then we will show it to you how to utilize this equipment for fabricating a patch electrode that can be used for not only measuring EEG, but also to measure EMG signals. Okay. So, clean room is used to control particle counts, contaminants and relative humidity to achieve more efficiency in fabrication of devices with better repeatability. Depending on the particle count, that clean room are categorized into several classes, as I said, from class 1 to class 10,000. If you talk about class 1, then particle per cubic feet, there would be 0.1 micron 35 particles, 0.2 micron 7, 0.3 micron 3, 0.5 micron 1 and 1 micron and 5 micron particle would be none. alright. Same thing if you go for class 10, class 100, class 1000, that means in cubic feet, okay, particle per cubic feet, that means it is extremely clean. Also generally when it is chip manufacturing, I will show you in one of the video that it is a robotic arm and robotic system that actually does the process. So, that entire thing is covered, but to control those particular semi automatic system we require a fab engineer. So it is more like for the personal rather than for the equipment, because equipment is within that casing where already the environment is maintained, right. So, if you see class 10, class 100, class 1000, then the number of particles would change in 1000, 10,000 and 100,000, this particles would present. So, we have not written anything, it will be there, but 0.5 micron, 1 micron and 5 micron particle will be in this particular values. Alright. You may be able to understand that how many particles are there generally in a environment. If you open your window in morning and if there is a sunlight coming entering to your window, you will be able to see a lot of particles floating, right. So, generally that is what are the particles. Okay. Anyway, the point is we can also classify the clean room based on the ISO standards. So, according to ISO clean room standards, clean rooms are classified right from ISO 1 to ISO 9. Again generally class 1 falls in ISO 3 and class 100,000 falls in ISO 8, while general room air is ISO 9. Okay. So, these are the standards just for your information. Now, how this clean room environment is maintained. Okay. So, there is a filter called high efficiency particulate air or HEPA. Okay. So, HEPA filter or high efficiency particulate air filter is one of the most important component, as it absorbs particle at the air inlet of the clean room. These supplies filter air throughout a clean room to maintain temperature, pressure and humidity with a circulating airflow. Additionally, along with HEPA filters, clean room also has air showers, and this is implemented between clean room and outside environment at the entrance. So, let us say the person standing here, when he enters the clean room, if there is a air shower here, then it will help to maintain the environment from outside to the inside of the clean room. Air shower bombards the person with a flow of filtered air to dislodge particles and foreign objects from hair, skin and clothing. So, the point is anything on the your clothes, or if the hair is there, or any dust on the skin is there, this bombardment of the air shower will help to filter that or dislodge that particular particles. Then there are pass through windows, alright. So, that means that a person does not have to literally come inside, but can pass the device or photoresist or any other component through this particular pass through window. So, there is a person, this person is inside the clean room, while there is another person outside the clean room, and these pass through windows are used in a way that first let us say this window is closed, this window is closed and the window that you can see here is opened. Then the person will keep the whatever components are there, then this particular window is closed and this one is open, and the engineer within the clean room will take the component from the box or pass through window. After taking that particular box, he will or she will close the window. This is a easy way, because then the person who is outside does not have to wear the entire PPE. Right. PPE stands for personal protective equipment or personal protective equipment, yeah, and it consists of all the way from your gown, shoe cover, hair cover, gloves, right. Then we have the beard protection, we have the glasses, right. So, this consists of all this stuff. Like I said, the interlock ensures that only one door will be opened at a time. Okay. So, how the airflow occurs in a clean room? You can say that a typical clean room is there is a room air in, there is a HEPA filter, right. It's typical clean room. This is how the infrastructure is, and you can see that there is a slight positive pressure and there is a unidirectional flow, and this goes out of the clean room. So, the air is introduced and recirculated in the clean room after removing dust particles using HEPA filters. Usually these filters and ducts are made up of stainless steel or other non shared materials to ensure minimum number of particles. Separation of the particles from the air during recirculation of air is difficult using filters due to turbulence. So, a unidirectional flow is maintained. So, what are the control parameters? Number of particles, relative humidity, generally it is between 35 and 40, and it is maintained with a very narrow band of plus minus 2%. The temperature is below 20 degree and generally it is between 16 and 19 degree centigrade. So, what are the two sources of contamination? The sources of contaminations in general can be divided into 4 types: tools, that is fabrication generated particles, lubricants, or sorry, friction generated particles, lubricants. Second one is product generated, that is degassing, evaporation of chemicals. Third one is materials, which is aerosols, water cleaning chemicals, wipes, tapes, dusters, stationery, this all causes contamination. And final and the most important contamination is through the persons working inside the clean room, alright, personnel working inside the clean room. These are from skin, flakes, oil, perfume, cosmetic, hair, lint and fiber from clothes, and so on and so forth, alright. To reduce this, generally the PPE can be takes care of it. However, it is advised not to use any cosmetics, particularly when you are working with a clean room. Perfume is we should not wear any perfume, right, and if you are wearing the PPE, then probably the contamination because of the personnel working in the clean room would be less. So, these are the following items which are not permissible inside the clean room, alright. See, normal paper, pencil and fabrics from natural fibers, wet, dirty and dusty clothes, and loose clothes and dangling jewelry. You see, this is a very loose cloth. The reason of not wearing a loose cloth and to wear a proper fitting cloth is that your cloth will not get entangled while working in a clean room, right. Dusty clothes for sure, because of the dust that can fall is not allowed. Stationeries and paper will also leave the fibers, that causes the contamination in the clean room. Then wet clothes are not allowed, right, jewelries are not allowed, because while you operate the system, if the jewelry comes and entangles, it may cause any kind of incident or accident, right. So, we need to stick to the protocol, and that is why I have recorded a lecture where we show you how to enter a clean room. Now, if you see the gowning procedure, like I said, there are face mask, hairnet, gown, clean room shoes, gloves. So, gowning and PPE. So, gowning procedure should be strictly followed for the person's safety as well as to save fabricated device from human generated contaminants. Also, if you see that if you have loose clothes, there is a entanglement hazard is that. So, you need to wear hairnet, lab coat, gloves and booties or shoe cover inside the clean room. What are personal protective equipment? So, proper gowning is mandatory before entering the clean room, and there are process specific PPE to wear before starting the process. Face shield is mandatory during handling chemicals. Generally, we wear the glasses, but when we are working with acids, in wet bench is used to create diaphragm or to etch the silicon or to etch different kind of metals, insulator and semiconductors. So, wet bench are two types: acidic wet bench, that is a wet bench that holds the acid. Second is wet bench in which you can use solvents. So, it is advisable and in fact, it is mandatory to wear the face shield when you are using the acid bench as well as solvent bench. So, working at wet benches, nitrile gloves is compulsory or mandatory, MAPA gloves is required, afterfront gloves are required, latex and vinyl gloves are not allowed. Alright. So, you need to take care of this. Wet bench protocols, as you can see here, during working or accompanying someone at wet bench is mandatory to wear lab shoes, closed toe shoes. This is extremely important. Whenever you work in a clean room environment, you should wear a closed toe shoes. Aprons, face shield, appropriate gloves, and most important thing is you should never ever touch your eyes or your belongings or with your contaminated gloves, right. Everything you consider as hazardous while working in a fab lab. It is as good as that anything that you touch would cause a problem, and that is why if you are wearing your gloves, if you handle a chemical, even it is a solvent, even can be acetone or ethanol or methanol or IPA, still it will cause harm if it touches the body. Alright. So, forget about acids, I am just talking about some solvents, right, some alcohols, this will also affect your body, and that is why if you have been working inside the clean room, until you come out, until you discard your gloves and your PPEs, you should know, and you should wash your hand and then only touch your face or any other your hands or your body anywhere. The point is that until and unless you come out of the clean room, you should not rub your eyes in particular or touch your face or your hands with your gloves. Okay. I mean surface of the hand, okay, not the PPE. So, you need to also follow the MSDS guidelines. You have to check the hazardous symbols when working in the clean room. As you can see here, there are a lot of symbols like for example, gas under pressure, right, corrosive, then serious health hazards. Even breathing these chemicals will cause a serious health hazard, right, like breathing VOCs which are volatile organic compounds will cause a serious lung damage. Acute toxicity symbol is there, and oxidizing, explosive, right, hazardous to environment, flammable. You need to understand all these symbols, you need to take care while working in the clean room environment. So, this is what is shown, that a person is wearing apron, right, face shield, appropriate gloves, right, before using the wet bench which is your acid bench. So, the MSDS or material safety data sheet is document that contains information on potential hazards of a chemical. Hazard pictograms on MSDS form part of internationally globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals can be seen in this particular slide. You can see that there are several hazards which can be given color. For example, specific hazard is generally in white color, instability is in orange color or yellow color, health hazard is in blue color, while fire hazard is mostly in red color. So, health hazard generally comes as a blue color. You can see here recommended protection, susceptibility to burning which is fire hazard, that is why it is red, and instability is susceptibility to energy release is generally given in yellow color. So, for example, if you see health, then specially full protective suit and breathing apparatus must be worn, depending on the again the hazardous level. So, it starts from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. In 0 no precaution is required, but if it is 1 breathing apparatus may be 1, 2 then you go further, that breathing apparatus with full face mask, then 3 full protective suit and breathing apparatus, and fourth, full protective suit and breathing apparatus must be worn. Okay. Same thing if you see flammable, at 0 it will not ignite, at 1 it ignites when preheated, 2 it ignites when moderate heating, 3 ignites under normal temperature, and 4th is extremely flammable. When you go for instability, that means at 0 it is normally stable, 1 not stable if heated, 2 violent chemical change but does not detonate, while 3 is may detonate with shock or heat, and 4 is may detonate under normal conditions, that means it is unstable. Alright. So, you need to understand what kind of precaution level you need to take while working in a clean room, and like I said, there are symbols that you need to follow. Then you can see here there is a curtain, and then there is this is a shower, and this is for the eye splash. So, in case there is a chemical spill on the floor, dilute with water and apply chemical spill pillows. There are chemical spill pillows which you need to use, and before that you need to get trained on how to remove the spill on the floor. Spill on person, if there is a chemical spill on your fellow colleague or on a person who is working in the clean room, then wash under safety shower and seek medical. If this is a safety shower, you should wash completely under safety shower and immediately seek any medical attention. Then you have HF spill. HF spill is hydrofluoric acid spill. This is most dangerous, and that is why it is highly dangerous to internal tissue and bone damage. Wash with large amount of water, removing contaminated gown. Apply calcium gluconate gel and seek immediate medical attention. So, when you are working with HF, be extremely careful and make sure that it does not spill. In case God forbid it spills, then you need to immediately wash with large amount of water that particular part which has been exposed to this spill, and you should immediately apply calcium gluconate gel which should be there in the clean room lab. Electrical safety is another point. Generally we do not consider electrical safety as very important stuff in most of the laboratories. It is important that we put all the possible signatures such as hazardous voltage, then there is a electrical hazard, then you should keep out of the electrical shock, severe shock hazard, there is a hazardous voltage damage and high voltage thing. Now, you can see here this kind of stuff, right, you will see in most of the laboratory. Avoid, don't use wet hand and connect your system, right. You should not work in an environment when there is a tangling of the wires along with your leg. You see, this is a broken cord, you should never use broken cord. This is at all not allowed, right. This can cause a tremendous amount of fire and short circuit. This is not allowed. Okay. So, any laboratory, the first thing from the safety point of view is a electrical safety. At no point of time you should be working in a lab which does not follow electrical safety regulations. Okay. Very important. Before you make device to save human, you should have an environment where the humans are safe, is not it? Otherwise, no point of doing all this research and development and making 100 kind of different cool devices. If the environment in which you are working is not safe, no point of working at all. So, that is why the first is electrical safety, fire safety, health safety, the environment and laboratory safe, and then you work in the lab to make device or components or equipment that can be used for the society. All right. So, safety is extremely important point, whether you are making a device or you are working in an environment, and that is why electrical safety comes as a top priority along with other safety environment like fire safety as well as the health safety. Okay. So, the another one is safety fire. You should generally have and most of the labs would have fire extinguisher. You should know that there are several kind of fire extinguishers. For example, from there is a water, foam spray, ABC powder, carbon dioxide and wet chemical, and depending on the fire, either it is wood or paper is burning, then you can use all of this fire extinguisher except carbon dioxide, because carbon dioxide will further enhance the flaming. Flammable liquids, if it is there which is on because of the fire is there, then you can use foam spray, ABC powder and carbon dioxide. You cannot use wet chemical and water. same thing for flammable gases, you can use only ABC powder. For electrical contact, ABC and carbon dioxide. Finally, for cooking oils and fats, if they are on if there is a fire, then you should only use a wet chemical kind of fire extinguisher. Anyway, these are just for your understanding and knowledge, is not really that part of the syllabus, but it is very important. Before you understand the clean room, you should understand all these protocols. So, there is a trigger, if there is a fire in the lab, you should trigger the alarm, leave the building and reach to the nearest gathering point, report to assembly point, that is what a gathering point is. Do not return to building until authorized to do so. Do not use elevators in any case, use fire extinguisher only if you are trained. Okay. So, also always follow the emergency exit sign. So, let me now show you how the clean room protocol is followed by playing a video, and that will be the end of the module. Alright. So, you see the video and then I will leave you on that particular video, and then we will see another module where we talk about the silicon wafer and the silicon dioxide, because oxidized silicon wafer is a substrate that we will be using for designing the EEG electrodes. Alright. So, till then you see the video, and I will see you in the next class. There are several equipment in the clean room class, let us say class 1000 or class 100, which uses lot of gases, and these are harmful gases because these are used for growing silicon, also etching silicon, and etching several other metals, semiconductors, insulators, right. Silicon of course is a semiconductor. So, we not only use the gas, we also use chemicals. So, if you do not follow the protocol, it is extremely harmful or dangerous for the clean room user, and that is why clean room etiquettes are extremely important. When to throw the gloves, where to throw the gloves, when you start the process, what precautions you need to take, so on and so forth. So, we will be talking about this particular etiquettes in this particular lab class. We will also understand different equipment such as microscope. Now, when we talk about microscope, we have metallurgical microscope, which we will be looking at this particular lab class. Then we will also look at the incubator. So, what exactly incubator is, and what kind of incubators are there in this particular lab. We will focus on the incubator that is used for cells as well as bacteria. See, incubator will be similar to, or equipment which is similar to our body environment. It will have 95% relative humidity, it will have 5% carbon dioxide, and the temperature is around 37 degrees centigrade. This incubator environment is used for cells, so that cells are alive. Then when you talk about cells, it can be cancer cells, it can be other body parts, cells from other body parts or tissues, and we also talk about bacteria, right. Because one of the techniques that we will be looking at in this particular course is to develop microfluidic chip for capturing bacteria from a biological sample. We will also talk about cells and tissues, and that is why if you want to keep the tissue or cells alive, you have to use a media, and this entire structure or the in vitro platform should be kept in the incubator, which will have a similar environment like our body. So, we will be talking about incubator in the lab class. We will be also looking at HEPA filters. So, what are HEPA filters? HEPA filters are high energy particulate air. The teaching assistant will discuss the kind of HEPA filter. We will be showing you the clean room which is non-conventional clean room, and then we will also show you the clean room which is conventional clean room. So, what are the difference? The non-conventional clean room is clean room where you don't have the filters onto a false ceiling, but instead of you will have the filters that you will be looking at in the lab, which are modules, and then the TA will tell you what is how it can be used to filter the air within the laboratory. Alright. So, this will be our lab 2. I will request my teaching assistant to now teach you about the clean room etiquettes, incubators, metallurgical microscope, and HEPA filter. Again, like always, you are free to ask us any questions, any doubts that you have through NPTEL forum. right? So till then, you take care, have fun with the lab class, understand it thoroughly, and feel free to ask questions. Thank you.
So now we have a visiting scholar who want to use the facility here. As you can see, he would like to use the clean room for his purpose. So now he would enter the clean room. So he is Professor Shivshankar from KLE Technology University, a visiting scholar here in DESE. So now even before he enters the clean room, let's see the procedure what he follows. So as you can see, he's picked up the shoe covers from the container there, and he stands over the carpeted area, just so that you don't contaminate from the external ground. So you ensure you stand on the carpeted area, which is generally clean compared to the surrounding environment. So now, after wearing the shoe covers, he uses the clean room. As you can see to the right side, there are laboratory safety protocols which clearly state the mandatory protocols which are to be followed even before entering the clean room. So now he takes the access and enters the clean room. So now once he's got the access, like you can see, he opens the clean room door. So now you see how he enters the clean room and then shuts the door. So the noise what you saw in the clean room is the air filter. On top we have an air curtain which is going to flow air at around 10 meter per second speed. So the inrush of air, the influx of air is just to ensure that the particulate count is constrained or restricted to that area in order to reduce any sort of contamination or particulate count or dust entering inside the clean room. We have this mechanism of flowing high speed air just at the entrance of the door. Now as soon as you give your fingerprint and open the door, the sensor there detects the entrance and then the air curtain gets activated. Now that we've seen how our visiting scholar has used the gown there and he's worn. As you can see, he's having his shoe covers and the gown. And to his right side, there is a hand sanitizer. Again, why is it important to use the hand sanitizer when even before you enter the clean room? In case you think there could be some sort of dust or particulates on your hand, you ensure you use this sanitizer and clean your hands just so that it does not hamper the working of your device. Also, even before you leave this laboratory, always use the sanitizer. Again, in the coming modules, you will understand how you will be doing the cell and tissue culture, and you will be dealing with these sensors, so that once you start working with them, your hands get contaminated, and just to prevent them from harming yourself and prevent you from any sort of disease, you always use the sanitizer, protect your hands, and then move out of the lab. Next, he proceeds towards the bench where we have the hairnet, face mask and the gloves. So as you can see, he picks up the face mask, always ensuring that the white color thin strip comes on top, and so that it fixes right on top of your nose in a proper manner, so that you need not keep on meddling with it while and then it might disturb while you work. So just that you have to follow a right procedure while you're gowning yourself. Now that we have worn the face mask, let's see how he uses the hairnet and covers the complete head, just so that there is no no contamination due to hair fall. So now that we have the hairnet on, let's see how the gloves are chosen and worn. So there are 3 sets of gloves. considering he would just do the normal works under a workstation, like just study or characterize his devices, then he would go with the nitrile gloves of a particular size that fits him right. Assume you have a loose gloves and then you move towards your workstation, then there's always possibility that it would really not give the right tactile feedback to your hands, and then there could be slippage or any other sort of activity which you don't want to happen inside the clean room. And always it is important for you to notice while you see the video how he's using the gloves, and then ensuring that the gloves sits exactly on top of the cuff sleeves of his lab coat. So in case you're moving to wet bench or any other workstation where you're dealing with HF or such harmful acids, then what you do is you don't remove these gloves, but just on top of these gloves you wear the silicone gloves or the MAPA gloves, the thick gloves which are chemical resistant. So these gloves are not really chemical resistant, they're just used to protect the environment from contamination. So this was the entire gowning procedure what the visiting scholar has followed in order to use the clean room facility here in the lab. Now that we have seen how a clean room procedure has to be followed, like you've seen how the gowning procedure, the sequence of following the procedure becomes very important. Let me tell you more about the clean room. So here when I say class 10,000 clean room, I told you initially that the particulate count is restricted to certain numbers, and that you could study more about how the ISO standard is and how clean rooms across the country and nation and worldwide have been classified based on the ISO standards. So here we have a class 10,000 clean room, and apart from the particulate count, another important heart of the clean room is the HEPA filter. So you can see the big tower here. There are 4 such towers in our laboratory here. So this is the HEPA filter. HEPA stands for High Efficient Particulate Air, HEPA. So there are different types of filters, the EPA, UCLA, HEPA filters, again based on their efficiency and again depending on the type of environment and the usage. So here we have HEPA filters. The main purpose of using this is to reduce the particulate count. A controlled environment inside the clean room is maintained just because of these filters here. So it is going to maintain the temperature, the humidity levels, as well as the particulate contamination. And then there is a positive pressure module along with the 4 towers here. So we have 2 towers here and the remaining 2 in the biology section on this side of our lab. So this is the biology section, and as you can see there is a tower on the other end of the biology section. So there are 4 such towers here, and then there is a positive pressure module on one end. So what the positive pressure module does is it is going to pump in pressured air. So why do you need to have an environment which has slightly higher pressure compared to the atmospheric or the outside environment? So this entire room is slightly at a higher pressure compared to the outside. Just when you go beyond the door, the pressure outside is completely different. It is lower compared to this pressure here. So we maintain this pressure using these HEPA filters, and the purpose of having higher pressure inside these rooms is just to avoid influx of air. So you always know that air always flows from a higher concentrated area to a lower pressure area. So when you maintain a higher pressure, so there is clean air which would go out, but then the contaminated air or the unfiltered air which is outside would not infiltrate into this environment, and that's why we call this as a controlled environment, and hence we have the HVAC system. As you can see, we had an air curtain just at the beginning at the entrance, just to reduce the particulate contaminants which could be affecting the environment inside. So how these HEPA filters work is 50% of the atmospheric air is taken in, and 50% of the air which is inside, the clean air, is always recirculated within these filters. So when you're talking about recirculation, what happens is, assume I'm going to maintain this clean room at perfectly clean levels. So the amount of energy that the entire HVAC system takes, the load on the system reduces, provided you put your efforts in maintaining the clean room by following these procedures, reducing the particulate count. So by following these procedures, you could reduce the load on the HVAC system. Otherwise, what happens is, provided you want the particulate count to be low, however you do not follow any of these guidelines, the amount of load what the system takes is higher. So they have a lifetime, and each of the system have their own lifetime, and efficiency frequently have to be checked. They have to be checked annually for their pressure levels. So there is no point in them if they do not function properly, and if the room is not maintained at positive pressure, then there's no point in us having a controlled environment system. There could be possibility of having the malfunctioning of your devices, or having not maintaining the clean room for its purpose. So in order to save your devices for a better efficiency, for a better lifetime of these filters, you always do your best to maintain the clean room for the given standards. And this was a brief introduction about how we work in a class 10,000 clean room, how the gowning procedure is to be followed. Once we have all the basic steps in hand, then we proceed in our future modules, in our next coming modules. What are the different equipments that are available in the facility here? Why are those equipments used? Where have they been procured from? How they can be handled, and what characterization can be done using the tools and its designated places. It will be briefed in our future lectures. So this was about the gowning procedure in a clean room. Thank you.